Mike McCool here with the Royal Examiner in our studio today with Joel Fernandez. Joel is the founder, I guess would be the right word, of the Living Nazareth High School. In the foundation stage. Joel was with us earlier in the year when they were planning to start the new school year, which kind of got, COVID out. That's going to be a new word, I think, here. We're going to blame everything on COVID, which is
it's already started. Yeah.
So kind of bring us up what happened. You didn't get the school open, so
Right.
So what's the plan now?
Well, number of things have come up in the course of our planning this year. And obviously, it was less than ideal to try to plan to open the school in the midst of the pandemic, and that obviously, threw a good number of things for our loop, especially many of the events that we were trying to gain publicity for the school,
Sure.
obviously. But it did give us some time to really take a step back and reflect on really what God's will for the school is. I mean, obviously, even this is not outside the hand of providence, so we're really just trying to find His will in all of this and see what He's having us give greater attention to. And one of those things really is to rethink the way that we're doing tuition. I know last time we were here, we talked about a number of things that we rethought against what might be a more conventional educational model. But I feel that by and large, we're actually still, buying hook, line, and sinker the way tuition is done at most schools across the country. And it really invited a conversation and a dialogue with our Lord on whether or not that needs to be the case. One of the things we found during this year was that many of the families that expressed interest actually did need some degree of significant financial aid. And it just really brought this, question back up, which had already been starting to come to mind in prayer. And we really, took it back to prayer a lot more seriously and felt that God was calling us to do something rather novel as well, which is to really found the school on a tuition-free model. What that means is not necessarily that families aren't going to pay anything, but we invite families to support the school in whatever way they can without letting it be a barrier to the families. And while it's a very novel approach in terms of the current educational climate, there's actually a great deal of precedence for it, even in the modern time period. You have our own Elizabeth Ann Seton, who founded schools in this area with that same mindset. You have over in Australia, St. Mary MacCullagh, St. John Bosco in Italy, St. Mother Teresa of happy memory in India, all founded schools on such a model and really relied on the providence of God, assisted by the goodwill and cooperation of those He inspired to give to these causes, to really keep the doors open and, the people working for them well fed and, well clothed and a place to stay. And He did not disappoint. He never does,
Right, exactly. Well, it's kind of like pay what you can.
Exactly.
It's kind of like, you see that they're doing that in restaurants. I mean, you go in, no menu, no prices on the menu, just pay what you can. If you can afford to pay more, you can. If you can't, you pay less. And what surprisingly they're finding out is they're more profitable. Mm-hmm. So people, and especially when you get into schools, this pandemic has caused parents to really focus on schools.
Yes.
They are very disappointed with a completely, what you call a virtual learning environment.
Yes.
I just don't think that's going to, I think it's the way we're going to be going, probably more and more so going in the future. But initially, parents are a little disappointed, and I think everyone's disappointed. In that.
Yeah, I'm no stranger to that fact. I mean, I've heard from many parents that they are very disappointed with the way that this crisis has been handled, particularly in the realm of education. And while there are some benefits to a virtual model, it's it's not simply a matter of technology and the human race advancing to a certain point where we can do this. Like, human beings remain human beings. And one of the basic needs of a human being is human interaction.
Exactly.
And we can't try to eliminate that. That's been, sadly, I think, one of the great mistakes about how the pandemic has been handled in general, is that the need for human contact has been not accurately discerned as a need and has been just tossed by the wayside and discarded for whatever other needs, real or apparent, may have been brought forward and been placed in the limelight, whether it be by media, by conversation, by whatever it is. But human interaction, like on a personal level, face to face, remains something that is an incredibly deep-seated need in the human being. I mean, as some of us might remember, stories of these orphanages where they had the children and they provided all of their physical needs, but because they had no human interaction, many of them died.
Right. They didn't pick those children up.
Right.
Right.
And it's preposterous to change, it just as it would be preposterous to think that, oh, these children just need food for the first 5 years of their lives or 10 years of their lives, and then we can stop feeding them and they don't need food anymore. It would be just as preposterous to think, oh, they need human interaction for the first 2 or 3 years of their lives, and then we can just, ignore them. And it's like, no, human beings are human beings. They have certain basic needs, and these needs do not change over time.
Right.
Not over that individual human being's time and not over our time as a civilization.
Right.
And as long as that remains a human need, then there's going to be a desire and a need for personal instruction. Right. And some parents have been very blessed to realize during this time that they are much more capable of homeschooling their children than they might have been scared to think before.
Exactly.
But for those who still find that it's very challenging or find certain subjects very challenging, then we want to be, one of the options available for parents to say, hey, I want an option that engages my child in personal interaction with their teachers and with others, and provides that kind of social growth that's necessary to make them a fully flourishing human being.
Right. Well, the Apostle Paul tells us not to... I'm trying to think of the exact quote, but do not forsake the fellowship one with another like some do, and to go and exhort one another and bring people up. And that goes back to that social reaction that you're talking about. We're made to be social creatures, and I think that's something that we're missing probably. I mean, we know we're missing it now during a virtual thing. What kind of... You think about a lot of your school, I think we talked about it before, more of a classical education model as well? Is that something that's different other than...
It's interesting to think. I've heard a lot, like as I described the model to people, I've heard it labeled as classical, I've heard it labeled as Montessori.
Right.
I really like to think that I'm just taking... I've actually been a teacher in each of these models. I've been in the public school, I've been in classical schools, I've been in Montessori. I've been in other types of independent schools, and personally, I like to think that, God's just blessed me with a certain experience that I'm able to kind of cherry pick the best pieces of and put together in this project that He's inspired. So, I mean, our academics is very largely inspired by the classical model in terms of the material we're covering, and in some senses, the way in which we're covering it. It's inspired partly by Montessori in that there's a great deal of freedom and responsibility given to students. You have the leisure periods where they have time to explore their own pursuits, guided by teachers and other adults in the community. So they might be, one leisure period might be to just go out and play some basketball and maybe learn some of the finer details of how to properly shoot a free throw or a three-pointer, or how to play defense or whatever. Another one might be a teacher sharing their favorite types of poetry with their students, and they're growing in that way. Somebody else might decide to run a little workshop where people can do woodworking and get a little bit of work with their hands.
Sure.
It's only going to be limited by the talents and the imaginations of our guides, and the students will be able to afford that 3 times a day, in addition to their classes, which will run regularly throughout the year.
Right.
But all of this while still, keeping the school keeping the students in school for a modest amount of the time of the day so that they can still spend an ample amount of time with their families. And so in that sense, it resembles a little bit more of a homeschool co-op, which I've also heard it compared to.
Right.
It's not really any one of these things, but I like to try to think that we've taken the elements that are some of the biggest pros of each of these models and tried to build a model that retains all of them.
That sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Are you going to stay with the K through 6th grade to start with?
No, we are actually operating as a high school.
Okay. So it's
so-
going to be only high school.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's
Kind of a flip flop from what you. I guess you kind of need the kids to be a little older in order to adapt to this change.
one of the things that that has come to mind as we've discerned how to craft the school is that given the emphasis that we're placing on personal responsibility of the students, and one of the other major aspects that we're trying to incorporate into the school, and this is where it resembles a little bit more like a minor seminary, which is another model that is perhaps less well known, is that we want the students to have spiritual directors that they meet with on a regular basis, either priest or religious, to talk to them, on a once a month basis or so, and give them some real mentorship and real guidance in their lives, which at that particular point in their lives they desperately need. I don't think it's quite wise to incorporate the element of spiritual direction at a younger age, because really at that age the parents really should be the primary spiritual directors of their children. The children should have the confidence of their parents, and the parents should be able to guide them aptly through those ages. But once you hit those teenage years, there comes a real element of the developing personhood and individuality of that child, and they a lot of times need some guidance, and no matter whether it's provided or not, they will seek it
Exactly.
somewhere. And we would prefer to provide a good, wholesome outlet for that guidance that they're seeking, rather than them just seeking it in whatever group of peers they happen to be presented with, which may or may not always come with the most favorable results.
One thing I noticed about, I want to use homeschooling maybe as an example, or virtual learning, when children don't have that social interaction with their own peers, they seem to get along well with adults, but have a hard time coping with children their own age. Is that something you've seen?
I have definitely noticed that. I mean, it's not across the board, especially in cases where the homeschool students are part of a big family. That
Right.
certainly helps, because
That helps, right.
they get a good amount of sibling interaction. But also, there's lots of homeschool parents that will very readily seek out outside activities.
Yeah, I noticed that a
especially
lot in this community. There's a lot of homeschool groups that get together. I think
Oh
for that
yeah,
reason.
for theater, for sports, for dances, I mean, all sorts of things. So we're really blessed, especially in this community,
Right.
to have those kinds of outlets. But that is certainly another thing that we want to try to provide. Obviously, is that social atmosphere where they can have that interaction, not just with other adults, but with their peers, both in an academic setting where they can actually go into an exchange of ideas and have fruitful discussions and debates in a format that is actually amenable to intellectual growth, as opposed to, say, just getting on like a Facebook debate, back and forth, which, to be honest, in my personal experience, I've never ever found fruitful.
True.
I've made a personal resolution not to even engage in them anymore, and just invite people to message me on Facebook. If I can't do it in person, then I will entertain it virtually if they message me.
Right.
But it's really not a fruitful atmosphere versus a classroom, especially when you have that guide who can moderate that discussion. In some way provides for a lot more growth and interaction, as opposed to just like, oh, well, you said that and I don't like what you said. Oh, well, I don't like what you said. And it devolves into a bunch of ad hominem attacks and name calling.
Right.
And we can do better than that. So
Exactly.
they need that kind of interaction in the academic setting. They need that kind of interaction, in a physical setting in terms of sports, playing sports and other physical activities. And they need it in a social setting, where they can just engage each other in games and dances and, other things that, children their age like to do and can be done in a wholesome manner.
It sounds like you have put a lot of thought into this, and I know you've been working on it for several years. So the school is not located in Front Royal, but you're locating it in Berryville.
That's right.
And you're going to have transportation. You're going to service the Warren County area, the way we talked about before. And so what's the plan? Obviously, we're going to open next September, August?
That is very much in the hands of God. Like I said, this time has given us opportunity to take a step back. We feel that we're being called to offer this model as a tuition-free model. So much of our efforts during this time have been focused on trying to really secure the financial foundation of the school. And we want to make it a point that when we do advertise to open our doors again, it's done with the knowledge that we have, adequate an adequate enough foundation to be able to go through the year and not have to worry and sort of have a foot in both doors, so to speak, where we have to, tend to the needs of, building a school and teaching our students, and also still trying to garner support to make sure that the doors can stay open.
Exactly.
So we don't want to be caught in that kind of predicament. So we're trying to be very prudent about our start date. If we are blessed enough, by the time that it makes sense to advertise for the coming school year to make those advertisements, then we will. If we're not, then we're going to keep doing the work that we're doing right now and patiently wait until the time that God so chooses to bless the endeavor the way He sees fit.
Well, Joel, you keep us informed. Let us know so we can keep spreading the word of the school, because I think it's a great model for some people in our community that really are seeking that type of an education model for their children. It sounds like a great plan. So we'll put the information. You still have your website and everything up, and
Yep.
and we'll put that information in the story so people can contact you and follow up with you personally if there's some information they
Yeah,
need.
certainly. And then, if people would like to follow up with us in a more in-person fashion, there's an opportunity readily coming up very shortly, which would be the retreat that we're putting on the 2nd, which will be on the campus in Berryville. We actually have 2 priests coming in for the retreat to give some of the talks. I'll be giving one of the talks myself. There'll be time for prayer, and afterwards there'll be time for just some social gathering and caroling, and we'll have breakfast and lunch provided. And the retreat, like the school, will be free of cost and just donation basis only. As a matter of fact, it was that discernment that we made was not just for the school, but for any of the events that the school puts on. So we are really seeing this as an apostolate to the community, and we're going to be treating it that way in all respects.
Well, people are out there that can buy into they see what you see, the vision that you have, and you'll be surprised. Well, you won't be surprised because you're already aware, but of the people that will support this goal that you have. And I think that they say there's a lot of money out there, and I think people are just looking for a place to put it where they feel that they'll get it'll be the biggest reward and blessing on the most amount of people. And I think that maybe, you have one of those organizations that I'm sure that people will seek out and give you support.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're here for. I mean, I know it is the fact, because that's, it's what God has put on our hearts to do, and He's never wrong in that respect, or in any respect.
Sure.
And so, we're really just waiting to see what it is that He's going to do with this project. And meanwhile, we're just trying to be as open as we can to His will, and trying to make this apostolate as readily available as we can to the widest audience of people. And I think this new change is one of the ways in which we're able to do that.
Yeah, that's great. So anyone that's interested in this type of a program, get hold of Joel. He'll be sure glad to take your money, right? Well, we won't quite go that way, but people need to support this, and I think that people will come forth and support your project. Get together with Joel, find out more about it. If it's something that education is your thing, I mean that's a great thing. And there's a lot of projects like that people do get involved in, and we can look around our country and see that things are supported. I use the word charities, but that's, the government doesn't, charities take care of more people than the government does.
Of
and
course.
I think, school's no different. And I think that's a great thing. Joel, I really appreciate you coming in again. Keep us informed of what's going on. Again, we'll put the information in the story here that you can get hold of Joel and the Living Nazareth High School.
Yes.
All right. So we'll get the name right this time. But check them out. I think it'll be a very interesting thing to keep going forward. And we do know that school will be changing. It changed in the last pandemic, someone told me in 1914, is how we got the school system we have today. And it's going to change. Another pandemic's going to change it going forward. So we'll see what that brings. I appreciate it. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you, Mike.